Hear an introduction of everything before we go to the dungeons and have a look at the halls.
Okay.
So please have a seat.
Okay. You want to sit in this?
Because of the sun here.
Oh, the sun, yeah.
So you're once again welcome.
Okay.
My name is Cynthia, and this afternoon our tour. Oh yes, you can do it. Okay. So this afternoon our tour is going to be a walking tour. We'll be going to the females live dungeon, the room of no return. We'll have a feel of the 2 cells we have here, then later go upstairs and have a look at the rest of the place. But before we do all those things, I'd like to share with you a brief history about the castle.
Okay.
Alright, so first of all, this castle here was built by the Portuguese in 1482, but they arrived here in 1471, purposely to trade and spread Christianity. So they came along with some European goods like guns, gunpowders, iron bars, used clothes, alcohols, and other goods to trade with the golds, ivory, spices, and artifacts from the local people. During that period, there was nothing like currency. So the system of trading was barter trading system. That's they exchanged what they brought with the local people. So the purpose of this castle here was to serve as a trade post to protect their trading goods and the traders from possible attacks. Because other European countries made several attempts to capture the castle from the Portuguese. So in here, all the rooms we have on the ground floor, they were storerooms or warehouses that they kept the goods that they had and the ones that they brought in them. And during that period too, the rate at which the local people were giving the Portuguese the gold, it gave them the impression that the land was rich in gold. So they named the place Elmina, which means the mines. But the local people could not pronounce the name well. So Elmina was corrupted to Elmina. And also Aldea, which means the village, was also corrupted to Edina. So these are the names that are used by the people now. But these names doesn't mean that the local people never had a name. The original name of the town then was Anomansa, inexhaustible supply of water. That's water that when you drink, it doesn't get finished. But due to the 2 names, you hardly hear the Anomansa currently. In the 1500s, things changed in the history of Africans when the Europeans claimed they had discovered a new world by Christopher Columbus. When we talk about the Caribbeans and the Americans, you know, the places were rich in minerals and also fertile for plantations. So the Spaniards went in there and they started using the Native Americans there to work in the land. But due to the harsh treatment that they were giving to the people there ended up dying out. They were also affected by some European diseases like chickenpox, cholera, measles, and the others. So the harsh treatment and the diseases were wiping the populations in there. So in order to prevent that from happening, that was when a priest called Bartolomeo de las Casas, he was residing in the West Indies, and he suggested black Africans to the Spaniards. Because through his missionary works, he saw how strong and how hardworking the black people were. The black people were also taken to Portugal and Spain in 1441 when some explorers came to West Africa, and when they were going back, they went along with some Africans with an excuse that they're going to train them as missionaries to interpret languages and to serve as witnesses that when they came to Africa, this is what they came to do. But when they got there, things changed. They used them as slaves working in their palaces. But how they were treated then was totally different from when the transatlantic slave trade began. So in 1510, the Spaniards went to Spain and got some of the Africans to be tried in Hispaniola. And after the trial, they realized that indeed they were strong and they could stand the climate change in them. So in 1518, Emperor Charles V of Spain authorized a direct shipment of 15,000 Africans from Africa to Santo Domingo under a special license called the Asiento Agreement. And that period marked the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. So the warehouses here were converted to dungeons, and they started enslaving Africans in them. You know, they got them from other West African countries, but when they focus on Ghana here, they got them from Togo, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, and the northern parts of Ghana through raiding and kidnapping, thefts and deceits, and the trouble wars that existed during that period. You know, Africans were also fighting among themselves in order to expand their territories. So the Europeans came in, convinced the leaders then to sell their prisoners in exchange for guns and gunpowders. So the guns and gunpowders made them more superior than those that were using bows and arrows to fight among themselves. So those that were captured, they walked for months in maps. So when they got to Asin Manson, where we have the slave river, they lodged there. They shaved their hair, cleaned them up, applied oil on their skin to cover up the wounds that they had. They gave them food for a couple of days. That's for 3 days to 4 days, for 3 times to 4 times. So at the end of the days that they spent there, they were able to gain back the strength that they lost, because the Europeans wanted them to look good in the eyes of the guys. After everything, they continued their journey to the castle here. They were auctioned, branded, and they shared them in the dungeons. The Portuguese began with about 1,000 slaves. 600 were males and 400 were females. The males were kept at the main courtyard here, whilst the females were kept at the female slave courtyard. And they spent 155 years here. In 1596 and 1625, the Dutch came in, made attempts to capture the castle from the Portuguese. And when we look at this picture here, the attempts came from this side here, the seaward section, but they were all unsuccessful. But in 1637, with the help of the local people here, they were staying at this small bush here. They directed the Dutch from a town called Morin to use this hill up here to capture the castle from the Portuguese. And after the 3 days war, the Dutch succeeded in that. And the reasons why the local people did that were that when they were trading with the Portuguese, they were cheating them based on the way they were measuring the goods, using inferior goods like the guns, gunpowders, alcohols in exchange for the golds and ivories that the local people had. They also signed an agreement called the Regimental Agreement. It prevented them from trading with other European countries. So those that were caught in the act, they were whipped and they lost their lives on the first attempt, and the second attempt, they were killed. A lot of them too were not in agreement with the slave trading that was going on in here, because anytime they wake up, they will see dead bodies at the shops, questioning what was happening in here, because the Europeans' main target weren't capturing people from the coastal areas, but rather people from the hinterland. So they helped the Dutch out with the hope that things might be better than the Dutch warriors. When they came in here, through the attacks, they bombarded some areas. The Dutch repaired all those areas and they built themselves the forts, watchtowers, added extra structures to it. And due to that, they spent 235 years here. In 1807 and 1814, the British and the Dutch made attempts to abolish the slave trading, but it was just a mere paperwork thing that they did, because in reality, they were practicing illegal slave trading. In 1833, the slave trading was abolished by the British in Britain, but never affected the rest of the Europeans. till the 1860s and 1870s. That was a period when everything came to an end. Due to that, this castle here was no more profitable to the Dutch. So they sold it to the British in 1872. The British were already at Cape Coast and they were using that place for their trading activities. But when they came in here, they used the place to serve as their sub-administrative center. During the Second World War, they recruited Africans from all over the British West African countries, except Liberia, to fight in Burma and India. And after the World War in 1948, they used the place to serve as a police training center. They spent 85 years during the colonization period. And when Ghana gained its independence in 1957, they handed everything, including this castle here, to Ghana. Ghana is now 68 years, still counting. So in total, this structure here is 543 years old. Any question?
Not much. No, I used to see, because I'm from Jamaica. We're born in Jamaica. We live in the States. So we have a little background history between we and the British. Okay, we got our independence in 1962 also. So we had to fight them off just the same.
For a lot of period.
Yes. Yeah. All right. That's it. All right. Let the climbing begin.
Yes. That's why it's a walking tour.
Yes. Take it nice and easy. And it's not so bad today, temperature-wise. All right. So we're going in. Okay.
Alright, so we are in the female slave courtyard. So all the rooms you see on the ground floor here, they were dungeons for the 400 female slaves and children. Because families were captured and the children among them were also held captives in here. Before we have a look at the dungeons, please let's talk about this reservoir here. Be careful with your phones. So this is a water reservoir which can contain about 20,000 gallons of rainwater, built by the Portuguese in 1482. Pipes were laid to the rooftop. So the black pipe behind this pool here is the original pipe, channeled up there whenever it rains. The water was collected here. This one will filter the water to the reservoir. They use the water to wash, cook, and do other domestic purpose. When the Dutch came in, due to trust issues of it being poisoned by the Portuguese, they abandoned this reservoir and built their own reservoirs to use. And theirs were about 60,000 gallons of rainwater. And we have it at the main courtyard. The British also did some digging of reservoirs, and theirs are the back of the castle. But when the British came in, they tested this water here and realized that the water was never poisoned. Now let's have a look at the dungeons.
Okay.
This dungeon here contained about 120 females. Let's have a look at the largest one here. Please come in. This largest dungeon here contained about 150 females. They slept on this bare floor here, and they did everything on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about their feeding, feces, urine, blood, vomit, everything was done here whilst they were sleeping in it. They spent about 2 months to 3 months in the dungeons. So buckets were kept at the corners for them to use. But during their second month, they became weak to walk to the bucket. So they did everything on themselves.
Yeah.
You know, as females too, every month they had their menstruations. They did everything on themselves without taking their bath. This particular room was poorly ventilated. The only source of ventilation came from the 2 windows we have here, where the baths are, and the hole there. Here is the main gate, but that hole leads to a room that was called the magazine. In that room, the soldiers were keeping their ammunitions and other explosives. So whenever there was leakage, the toxic fumes came straight here, contaminated the air, and killed a lot of the females. So with a 150, not everyone made it after the month they spent in the countries. During that period too, the Europeans referred to the coastal lines of West Africa as the white man's grave, because malaria and yellow fever were killing them a lot. They found the place to be a punishment for them, so the men risked their life to be here without their families. So anytime the governors, the soldiers, and the merchants want to satisfy their sexual desires, they selected from the females to be sexually abused. Now let's step out, let me show you something, please. During that period, the governor stood up here. That was his balcony. He stood there and ordered the soldiers to bring out all the females in the dungeons for him to make his choice. So the selected one, because she spent a week there without taking a bath, the soldiers fetched water from the reservoir. She was naked and also humiliated. They washed her up, gave her something to wear and a food to eat to gain some strength. And after they escorted her using this private access here to the governor's bedroom.
Oh, okay.
So this staircase here leads to the governor's bedroom. They opened up a trap door, escorted her there, raped by the governor, and after the rape, she used the same staircase back to the dungeons. Before the ships would arrive for them to go to their new destinations, they were examined because a lot of them got pregnant out of what they did with them. So those that they found out, houses were built for them in town to be taken care of. 3 years after the delivery, they brought the children here to be educated. So formal education in Ghana here started in this castle, with the children that are referred to as the mixed race children or the mulattoes. And they were given European names that are very common in Ghana here. The women that gave birth to the children, they were freed to go back to their pharaoh's homes, but they lost their way back home. So they used them as domestic servants to the castle, and some too were mistresses for the governors and the senior officers. Some resisted the rape. They fought with the governor up there, but they were severely punished by the soldiers. Some too were very difficult in the dungeons as well. So let's step out, let me show you what they did to them.
Stairs that goes up.
Alright, so this is a cannonball which weighs about 25 kg. Chains or shackles were attached to it to put on their legs or hands. They stood here for 24 hours with no food, no water, whether rain or shine. So as they stood here, it served as a deterrent to the rest of the females in the dungeon. And those that resisted, they were taken back to continue with what they refused, because during that time, they would be weak to refuse. Let's have a look at this dungeon here, please. This dungeon here contained about 130 females, and it had a church on top of it called the Dutch Reformed Church. When the Dutch came, they were Protestants, so they abandoned the Catholic Church that the Portuguese built and rather had theirs on top of this dungeon. And most of the materials that were used to build the castle were imported. So the reddish bricks we have on the floor here were from the Portuguese, and the yellowish one here were from the Dutch. They used the bricks to balance their ships when they came in here, but on their way back, they used the slaves to do the balance based on the way they were packed in the ships. Now the cloth and chains you see here, they are not original. In 2016, students came in here to act and have a feel of what happened here, called the reenactment. So they used the cloth to cover themselves up, chains on their legs and hands. They slept on this bare floor here for 3 days. So they used this, filled with kerosene, to serve as light because the place looked dark during the night. And when we look at this corner here, these are the original iron bars used for the windows. And because they are rusted, we have them replaced by the wooden bars.
Okay.
Alright, so when the ships arrived, the survived ones, they used this passage here to the room of no return. So initially, there was a staircase here that we used to go to the place, but now it's a drainage. And to prevent accidents, we have these metals blocked here. So we'll be using the male transit dungeon to the room of no return. But trust me, we'll return back, okay?
Down we go again, stairs, stepper. Alright.
Okay, before they were shared in the dungeons after the action, they were branded. And this room right here was the branding room. Metals were put in fire, and the metals had initials on it, bearing the companies or the merchant names. They put that on their chest or back, and it is believed that a lot of them died from the shock. So the males were the ones receiving the branding, whilst the females and the children were wearing tags. But bear in mind, these things are mostly done on animals. So psychologically, they saw Africans as such. This room here, it's a transit and also a dungeon. Let's have a look at this thing here. They created this window here, and when it rains, it pours in here. So imagine putting human beings here, sleeping in what I mentioned on the female side with water coming inside here, worsen their case. So they were living terrible lives in the dungeons. The place is dark, so I want you to turn on your phone torches to help us go inside. There is a step down, and please watch your head when you're coming in, okay? Okay, so we are in the room, the intersection room, rather. Not yet at the room of nourishment. Because the survived female slaves used this direction here to the room of no return, whilst the survived males used where we came from. They met in this room here, but the question is, how sure are you that the person that you know among the group, you're going to survive with him or her? So all hopes were lost when they got to the room of no return, because no one knows what is coming ahead of them. As you can see, the gate is shut, so you go down properly. You take 4 to 5 steps before you come out to prevent accident. Please don't forget that.
Okay.
You are welcome to the room of no return. And the gate you see here was the gate of no return. During the trading of the golds and ivories, the Europeans used the same site to ship their goods to Europe. But during that period, the gate was wider to the cement. But during the slave trading, they narrowed it to this gate for easy counting of the slaves and controlling the lives of the slaves. Initially, the sea was very close to the castle, but due to the climate change, that's why we see it at the far end. So just like the way we can see some canoes back there, they came very close to the castle here with the help of ladders to descend them in it. They packed them in the ships and took them to the Caribbean countries, the Americans, and some too were taken to Europe to work on their plantations and mines. When you talk about the tobacco plantations, sugarcane, cotton, coffee, dye, and the others, a lot happened. Some died here in the ship before it sailed off because the packing wasn't done within a day. It took them days to do that. A ship could contain about 538 slaves, 443 or 442. By the time they finished with the packing, 90 died in there. When they sailed off in the middle of the sea too, a lot of things happened. The females were raped, some even died in the act. They were tortured, beaten. Some refused to eat because they wanted to starve themselves to death. And those that did that, they chiseled their teeth in order to create space in them. And because of the way they were packed, they were affected by diseases. And those that were hit by the disease, they took their bodies, whether alive or dead, threw them into the sea. So majority of them died in the ships before they got to where they were going. When they got to their destinations too, a lot happened. No rest because they were supposed to fulfill the reasons why they were taken there. They were tortured, beaten as well, to the point that a lot of them could not stand the way they were treated. So among them were runaway slaves that we refer to them as the Maroons. When you go to Brazil, Jamaica, Suriname, Mexico, and other places, they are there. They hid in mountains, cave trees for protection. But due to famine, some came back to steal from their masters. And those that were caught in the act, they lost their toes to serve as a deterrent to the rest of the slaves. Some came together, trained themselves, and fought against the European masters. And you can testify to that because Maroons and Nani fought for the freedom of the Jamaicans.
Yes.
And this was happened from the 1690s to the 1700s. Through a revolution, Haiti gained its independence in 1804, being the first Black African slave country to gain its independence during the slave period. And due to that and through other steps, that's why the British made that attempt to abolish the slave trading in 1804. But as I said earlier, it never worked out. And because whatever that they did were backed by insurance, they really maltreated the slave, because no matter what happened to them, they will go back for their money. So everything came to an end. And what happened next? Colonization came into the picture. After the Berlin Conference, they went and partitioned Africa among themselves, ruled it to their own satisfaction. Although Africans claimed they are independent, but we are still under them, dictating for us day in and day out. They don't want us to come there to their countries, but we can't make decisions for our own self. So we are praying that things work out for Africans. Someday. Yes.
Well, it's coming.
Yeah. Alright, so the reeds you see here, they are from those in the diaspora. They believe that those that died in here, their souls are still here. And as a way of showing respect for their souls to rest in peace. Some descendants will make prayers for their ancestors. So that's why we see the alcohol bottles around here. And what we saw on our way coming, like a huge shrine there, there is a program that's mostly held here called Fiancra by some African Americans. The reason behind that ceremony is that when their ancestors were taken away, they were not able to say goodbye to their families and friends. So as they are back here, they are here to show themselves to their ancestors that no matter what happened to them, they were able to find their roots back home. Alright, you can take your pictures, then we go out to a different place.
Right. You want to turn around? You can turn the video. Scan Ryan Monique in Africa, and we at the door of no return. This is where they lead our ancestor through this door into the boat that takes them out to the ship and take them to wherever, scattered us around the world, America, Jamaica, the Caribbean, everywhere. Brazil.
Stand there and turn around.
Okay, that concludes. Monique is getting short, and I got to do the same thing. Got to get short, take a few steps, and go up. Alright, so we're headed out. I think that concludes.
So this is a bit annoying, but it's very okay. Alright, so it's a flag written by a priest called A. Anderson. A priest called A. Anderson. He wrote this in memory of one of the Dutch governors who died here, and he was buried right here. The governor's name was Anderson. He came from Zeeland, which is a province in Netherlands. And he was the last director general of the West Indies Company over the north and south coast of Africa. He came here on the 16th January 1758, died on 12 March the same year. He was 41 years old when he died. Guess what he did?
My
The message here That is, according to the priest, he said the governor was respectful, was kind, was honest, was trustworthy, and others. Based on our definition for someone being kind and honest, with the explanation we've given or our experience in the digest, would you declare him to be someone that they can? Let's have a look at the two things.
Actions speak louder than words.
Yes. Alright, so these are cells. Okay, so the one with the metal gate was the European cell, and the one with the wooden gate with the scar and the crossbones, that's a condemned cell for the enslaved African men. Now we are going to compare the two cells we have here, then I'll explain it to you what happened in there. Here first.
Okay.
Hi, European cell. Because life here was so boring for some of the European soldiers. Because among them were criminals, ex-convicts, and mercenaries. So the kind of life that they predicted to have was totally different